hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chat. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, before we get into any of the subjects of this episode, I guess we're going to have to do a recurring segment on this channel, apparently. The updates of the health status of me, apparently. Because it seems that every week now I find some sort of new health thing to pay attention to. And what I have found out now is there's one tooth in my mouth that has a decent number of cavities. By the time this episode comes out, I will already be in the dentist figuring out what the heck to do about it. I don't have dental insurance, but this is something that I'm going to have to tackle because, well, bad things could happen if it goes untreated. As far as I know now, this is relatively early on into finding, this particular cavity that I saw, it was it just happened, apparently. I did have a smaller cavity that was just it doesn't seem that bad. But this one is a more noticeable one, so it's And then while looking into it, I saw something that could potentially be a third cavity in between the two teeth. So it seems that there were at least 3 cavities on one tooth. Given the fact that one of them is in between the teeth, I am prepared for the worst. Best case scenario, they can just fill the 3 cavities and clean them out, make sure nothing is shady. Worst case scenario, potential root canal or crown. But as long as that prevents the literal worst case scenario, tooth infection leads to brain infection and die, I could live with it. My bank account probably won't. But anyways, I know you guys don't care about all that, so let's get right into the news. First, some foreign news. Thailand. Because Thailand, if you don't remember, Thailand recently had a big electoral upset with electing a left-wing anti-military dictatorship party into their offices. But there's now a problem in the government formation because the leading candidate of the pro-reform party, ᵐᵒᵛᵉᵐᵉᵗ, he is not being allowed to become the prime minister of Thailand because the thing is they need a certain number of votes, and they just barely they didn't get to meet the threshold. They were a couple votes short. And the reason why the vote total was short was because of one interesting thing. The Thai Senate. The Thai Senate is actually an appointed position. All the senators were appointed by the pro-military dictatorship party, and as such, they voted in their interests. And, I get that's really all that there is to be said about this particular situation. I don't really know what's going to happen next. Speaking of situations that we don't necessarily know what will happen next, the Guatemalan election, because, oh boy, more things happened in a short amount of time. So what ended up happening was that the Guatemalan election has gotten very dangerous very fast because the public ministry, announced a big bombshell where they announced that the court suspended Bernardo Arévalo's party, Semilla, and because they were claiming that they had fraudulent signatures, and then raided the offices of their party to search for these fraudulent signatures. But the next day, the Constitutional Court then reversed this banning, so what is going to happen is that this election is supposedly going to go off without a hitch. But this has even gotten to the point where Sandra Torres, who was the woman who started this whole debacle about Semilla and Arévalo getting into the runoff, even she has temporarily suspended her candidacy in order to make sure that her and Bernardo Arévalo are on equal footing. Now, this is another thing where it's people are concerned. It's what's going to happen next? Are they going to recognize democracy, or is the power to moneyed interests going to prevent Bernardo Arévalo from getting into the presidency? And I think really this does show how powerful Bernardo Arévalo is as a candidate. Even though he's significantly less radical than his father was, his father was already not as radical as other people in his party, but even though he's not that radical, he is still considered a danger to Guatemala. And that is why they're doing everything in their power to prevent him from winning in this way, because he can win in the ballot box. He's very clearly poised to win in the ballot box. And like for the time being, I briefly changed my Twitter handle to have the Samilia logo in the like ad, because it's just like I want to show solidarity to Bernardo Arevalo, and I encourage everybody else to look into the situation, make sure that there isn't any shady things. Now, before we transition into talking about the other presidential election that I've talked about for a decent number of videos up to this point, let's take a brief moment to sidetrack to another foreign election related, well, not foreign election, but like foreign news related thing that is related to that election. Porfirio Muñoz Ledo has recently passed away, dying a few days short of his 90th birthday. Now, one of the things I found interesting was just the way he was described in the media, because like when he was described in the media after his death, they used the term political chameleon. And in retrospect, now I realize that terminology is absolutely perfect to describe Porfirio Muñoz Ledo, a political chameleon. Basically, he changed his tune whenever he needed to stay relevant in power. When he would, like when it was pretty popular to be left-wing, he would be left-wing. When it was pretty popular to be right-wing, he'd be right-wing. It was basically like he changed his party and sort of the people that he was aligned with in like throughout his whole political career. He's been politically relevant in Mexico since the 1970s, and he's shifted from being like a pretty prevalent member of like the mainstream like pre-party to being a hardcore leftist with Cuauhtémoc to then shifting right during the Vicente Fox administration, to then considering himself too left-wing for even the PRD. Like, I mean, for better and for worse, Porfirio Muñoz Ledo has like shifted his ideology a lot. He's a very fascinating figure, and I would probably want to make an episode of like who is about Porfirio Muñoz Ledo, because his history and his relevance in Mexican political history is just so weird and so fascinating. Again, just if you wanted to just briefly look into it yourself, and you'll see how weird it is. I mean, when you're at the point when both AMLO and Felipe Calderón can legitimately look at Porfirio Muñoz Ledo and say that they regard him as friends, it's like you can kind of tell that his ideology was a little bit interesting. But anyway, speaking of things that are interesting, now it looks like the Mexican presidential election is starting to fully get underway, because now the broad front of Mexico has officially announced the candidates that will be moving on to the second round, and things have already gotten a lot more heated ever since then. First, we have people who are basically nobodies like Jose Jaime Enriquez Felix and Sergio Ivan Torres and Israel Rivas Bastidas. Again, all of which are essentially nobodies. We've already talked about Xochitl Galvez, who is announced. Then there's Beatriz Paredes of the PRI. Then there's Enrique de la Madrid of the PRI. There's Miguel Angel Mancera of the PRD. Silvano Aureles of the PRD. Gabriel Quadri of the PAN. Jorge Luis Perisado of the PAN. Ignacio Loyola Vera of the PAN. Francisco Garcia Cabeza de Vaca of the PAN. And Santiago Creel of the PAN. Those were the people that were able to move on to the second round of this sort of process. But just recently, just today or just yesterday, it was announced that Gabriel Quadri has decided to suspend his presidential bid in order to just move forward with the process, because he's sort of starting to realize that he doesn't really have a chance in the next round, because at this point, it seems that everybody has kind of solidified that the unofficial candidate is Xochitl Galvez, and that has happened because AMLO has made it a huge point to attack Xochitl Galvez, because it seems like she's the only candidate of the field that actually can get people who are not of the traditional Mexican political elite to support them. So she is now the mainstream target of AMLO, and even to the extent where things are getting more heated, because the International Election Institute, the INE, has announced that AMLO is not allowed to criticize her and publicly condemn her, because then it would introduce like this huge problem, because he's the president and he's publicly condemning one of his political opponents. It would make an unequal campaign, and it's just a little bit funny just because it is pretty obvious that he doesn't want her to win. He wants his own party's candidate to win. So it's kind of like weird about that, but regardless, the thing that I find fascinating is the fact that due to the fact that she's considered the front runner of the party, it seems that the MC is officially starting to look into having talks with the opposition candidacy in hopes to potentially unite together to take down AMLO, especially considering there is already divides in the MC on what to do. Some members are openly saying that they need to join in this alliance, but then there are others that are saying that the MC needs to remain solo. Now, what the MC does next is what's going to determine what happens, like, what if the opposition actually does have a chance. Because the MC is the only opposition party that actually does have a chance of not necessarily even beating AMLO, but just being a viable candidate against him. But I think the fact that the MC has already floated the idea of, like, not having their, like, since none of their candidates are in the contention in this field, then it doesn't seem like that is going to be a likely scenario, because, I mean, again, like, truly, if they wanted to have a candidate that was truly outside of the, like, political scene, then they would have chosen, like, someone like Luis Donaldo Colosio. Like, he was the only one that I could have actually seen potentially beating whoever AMLO has as his party's presidential candidate. But, I mean, this other girl, ᵐᵒᵛᵉᵐᵗ, she does seem to have momentum there. She does have, like, a lot of the baggage of the PAN, the PRI, and the PRD. But since she's not a member of any of those parties, she's seen as sort of, like, somewhat free from them. But AMLO has been critiquing her on stuff regarding, like, corruption, regarding the fact that she ran, like, some companies, and those companies took a lot of money from the Felipe Calderón and Vicente Fox presidencies. Funnily enough, Vicente Fox has actually already openly endorsed ᵐᵒᵛᵉᵐᵗ against AMLO, which probably also helps raise her profile. Maybe this is AMLO's plan. Maybe he's trying to do a Pied Piper strategy, and he knows that the MC and all these people would be terrible picking her, so then he just decides to make sure that they back her. We'll have to wait and see on that. Speaking of things we have to wait and see about, now let's head over to the Americas to talk about something funny that just happened. Georgia mayor arrested on burglary and trespassing charges. A Georgia mayor was charged with burglary and criminal trespassing Saturday, leading the way for him to be temporarily replaced by one of the 5 city council members who sued him this year. Khalid Kamu, the mayor of the city South Fulton in metropolitan Atlanta, was charged with criminal trespassing and first-degree burglary. He was released the same day on $11,000 in surety bonds. He was also ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation. The police department forwarded a request for more information to the city's public affairs director, who declined to provide details Sunday, citing an ongoing investigation. Now, there are 2 things that are kind of interesting about this story. One is that the mayor in question is a socialist mayor, which is a bit interesting. But here's another thing. Apparently, it is being reported that he says that the house that he broke into was actually within his jurisdiction, that he thought it was an abandoned home that the city owned that he could then buy, but it turns out that it was actually owned by someone else. Now, there's really not much else I can say about this story. It's just kind of weird, interesting, and somewhat funny. But let's move on to a story that is considerably less funny. Well, funny in a degree. Okay, so you all may be remembering that the WGA is going on strike right now. And recently, things have gotten a bit more heated as the SAG-AFTRA has also announced that they're going to join the strike, making the strike larger than it was before. Well, it just turns out that the studios have fully just announced what they plan to do with the strike. And they just openly and blatantly stated that they're going to let the writers go broke before they even remotely talk. Because if the writers are broke and they don't have homes or whatever, then it will be very tragic to, they just probably won't continue the strike. And then they'll meet in with the studio's demands. However, one of the loudest voices for the strike, Adam Conover, has released a video where he basically explained, no, that's not going to happen because we already have all this stuff situated and ready we've prepared for the situation where writers who are down on their luck will be able to get the resources that they need to move forward. And it's already been pointed out that the studios, like, they don't need to, they're not spending that much money if they do just give in to the writers' demands. If they simply just meet the writers' demands, then they will be able to continue with everything and no problems will be had. But anyways, there's not much else I could say. Support the striking writers. And for all of you media people, I should say this. Be prepared for like next year's movies and TV shows to just be absolute garbage. Because without the writers, they're not going to be good. I mean, there are a lot of productions that I've already seen think might already be ruined. Because here's one big one. Deadpool 3. Because Ryan Reynolds is not being allowed to ad-lib. Because in doing so, he would have to consult the writers, so that they could rewrite his ad-libs to be part of the script. Be prepared for a lot of your favorite TV shows and movies just have a really crappy season. Anyways, let's move on to the last story. Remember when I said that I wouldn't talk about the Merriam-Webster candidacy anymore? Yeah, a lot of things have happened that have made me change my mind on that, because, like, things have been happening about the Merriam-Webster candidacy that it's just, you cannot overlook them and actually consider this candidacy seriously. For starters, a lot of people have already, have officially, basically everyone else who was, duped by this was apparently proven, I was proven right once again, because a lot of people who were in sort of, groups or whatevers that I was associated with have all basically now been yeah, I'm done with Merriam-Webster, because Merriam-Webster, again, did an anti-vax thing, where she basically went with the whole, there were, blah, 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 whatever the two things were, ivermectin and the other one, she was we should have been looking a little bit more closer into this. And it's funny just seeing all those tweets about people that are just yeah, I'm done. It's I literally tried to tell you all of this long ago, but you guys were the ones that were she only said something once 12 years ago, but this recent thing has kind of put her campaign in a whole new light. Just recently, she announced that she was going to be on her third campaign manager in this cycle, and Politico released something that is interesting, leaked audio, where she explains this, quote, I have put my own money in, and I don't have the money to continue putting it in at the level I have. Because remember, I'm not making a living while doing this. Basically, her admitting, she agreed with a volunteer on the Zoom who said that DNC insiders and efforts from the Democratic Party are determined to undermine her campaign, and she said she discussed this theory quite a bit with her campaign manager, Carlos Cardona. It is shocking to us too, really makes you wonder, I've never seen anything like this, and it doesn't make you wonder, politics is dirty. Claiming that the DNC, Biden, and whomever are trying to stunt her popularity on TikTok, where she has millions of viewers. She has apparently lost 6 staffers, and one of whom said a very interesting thing on social media by the name of Jeremy Elwood, who has basically, listen to this. I'm going to read the whole thing. Her campaign is not a campaign. It is a book tour. Here's how I know. I was the national field director. I was fired along with anyone who mentioned ballot access or a field plan. Her focus is only on events and social media. I was half joking a month ago that this is a book tour. I found out the day that I was fired that she has a book coming out in September. When I brought up in a staff call that we still don't have ballot access in any state, she literally called ballot access mythical stuff. Myself, national field director, and partner, field strategist, were let go after we toiled to make a solid national field plan and had to pivot to political director roles to fill gaps so that we could finish the field plan. We weren't allowed to complete our roles because of mythical stuff. Marianne has fired those who know how to make campaign win and has kept and promoted those who were only event and social media aware, book tour. Again, she has no ballot access and doesn't care, calls ballot access mythical stuff. She fired everyone who has semblance of field. She's promoted NH state director to campaign manager. His name is Carlos. He knows nothing about national campaigns. By the way, I've only worked on nationals for the past 8 years, nor has he any experience in the field, which is what it takes to reach voters. Marianne is a grifter. Do not support her. She is here to sell her book coming out in September, and that is all she is here for. If she wanted to win, she would listen to the multitude of experts that were on her campaign before she fired them for giving advice and direction. I worked for her, and I'm all the more sad because of it, because I was duped. I thought I was more aware of that. Go ahead, Marianne. Shoot me a cease and desist letter, because I will do neither. Your campaign has no hold because you are a grifting fraud. Gee, I wonder who of all of the people on the online left could have predicted that Marianne Williamson could not run a very serious campaign. If only there was somebody out there who was rallying, like making it very apparent that Marianne Williamson was not a serious candidate in both political experience or in actual policy. If only there was somebody out there who was letting people know about this long before any of this people spent time and money on this campaign. I wonder who that could be. It just kind of stinks literally being proven right time and time again and then still just being on this level. I'm just collecting W after W after W. But this isn't going to change a lot of people's minds. A lot of people have still made up their mind that they're going to support Marianne Williamson, and then they're going to support Cornel West, and then they're going to do whatever the hell else. Crystal and Kyle are going to continue talking about this campaign, and you guys are still going to be there in the comment section, liking, retweeting, following. You guys are going to be there because you guys aren't able to hold any of your actual people accountable for anything. It's the same thing with the TYT thing. This is like the 5th or 6th time that Cenk and Anna have been canceled, and yet you guys are still there for the next cancellation. If you want to hold them accountable, stop following them. Stop caring. Like, leave them be. It's just so, like, this is why it's just sort of dumbfounded just to be part of this, like, indie media sphere. Why these, like, thoughts-ons and stuff are so stupid. It's just, like, literally nothing is going to change. Unfortunately, you're not going to hold any of these people accountable. It doesn't matter the fact that Marianne Williamson is literally doing the same thing that her and Crystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski are going to bash the mainstream media for doing, exchanging positive campaign talk in favor of media appearances. Like, literally, it's just a circular cycle. Many people don't think about this, but it's true. The progressive media sphere has become the next thing of, like, the media sphere. Like, they just became what the mainstream media has become. They use outrage to get clicks. They continue to have, like, positive relationships with certain politicians, and then in turn exchange, like, positive coverage in favor of them coming on their shows, blatantly lie to their audience, completely change their point of views at the drop of the hat because of their whole liberal, like, progressive type aesthetic. It's like, guys, like, this is just nothing new. And it is still kind of depressing that people just don't see this, or if they do see this, they don't care. Like, right now, I literally just checked, like, I've seen a lot of people say, like, oh, I'm done with Marianne Williamson. They're still following Marianne Williamson. You're gonna say, oh, I'm done with Anna Kasparian. You're still following Anna Kasparian. You're gonna say, oh, I'm done with Kyle Kulinski. You still follow Kyle Kulinski. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're done with them, you have to be done with them. Like, here's what I did when I was done with Kyle Kulinski. I clicked the unsubscribe button and the unfollow button. The end. Sure, I might still talk about him occasionally, but it's just like, he's not in my media digest. I'm not sitting there watching every single video that he makes to find the clip to see. Like, and that's that's a lot of these accounts are like that. Like, Post Left Watch. It's like, you're literally there every single day for Jimmy Dore. You're there every single day for Kyle Kulinski. You're there every single day to shit on all of these people. And it's the same thing with that, like, quote-unquote G-Hive group. It's just like, you're there every day to, like, follow, like, retweet all of these other accounts that are just, like, just shitting on them. Just like, look, let's quote tweet this person and say, you're dumb, you're stupid. When literally you can just ignore them and be done. It's even more funny now because now Twitter is literally paying people to post their stuff on their platform. So now, if you quote tweet them, you're literally giving them money. So it's like, uh-oh. But anyways, I've rambled about that long enough. So let's move on to the main topic of this video. This is going to be another my problem with. That is going to be a little interesting. This is either going to be like the Rose Caucus one, or it might still be relevant. I don't necessarily know how relevant it is, because there's sort of like a little bit of a gray area on how relevant this organization is. Like, the jury's still out on that. But either way, this one is relevant to this channel, so might as well do this one. So, for those who have no clue what I'm talking about, let me explain. The Justice Party was a political party formed in 2011 by former Salt Lake City Mayor Rocky Anderson, a Democrat who had begun to grow disillusioned with his party. While Obama gave him hope, those were crushed almost instantaneously, and he up and left the party to form his own. The party would essentially be what the Democratic Party was, like with the motto that he coined for this party would kind of define how it is: economic, environmental, and social justice for all. And he would advocate for issues that he felt that the Democratic Party should have been advocating for, like repeal of the Patriot Act, and restoring Glass-Steagall, single-payer healthcare, legalizing marijuana, basic lefty stuff. Like basic lefty ᵐᵒᵛᵉᵐᵗ type stuff. And despite the fact that it was a relatively new thing, Rocky Anderson quickly became a prominent face in the third-party sphere, quickly getting on the level of the big three in the U.S. third-party sphere. The Libertarians, the Constitution Party, and the Green Party. Being invited to a couple of debates with them because he was generally regarded as, on their level. On the Wikipedia, when you go to the third parties, it's what are the third parties you see? You see the Democrats, you see the Republicans, and then you scroll down to the third-party independents. The four that they show are Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, Virgil Goode, and Rocky Anderson. Because Rocky Anderson was heavily regarded as, he was on their level. As it obviously says that he ran for president under this third party. He even tried to become a bit more prevalent and get the nominations of a couple of other minor parties. The Natural Law Party, the Peace and Freedom Party, America's Elect. That last one being a huge misstep because that one just didn't even end up doing anything with the massive ballot line they were given. And, interestingly enough, he even earned the support of the most prominent minor party presidential candidate of the 2000s, Ralph Nader. Granted, Ralph Nader's endorsement was sort of a little bit tied with Jill Stein, because it was in separate interviews, he said that he supported Rocky Anderson, and then in another interview, he said that he supported Jill Stein, so it was eh. And also, Nader's sort of weirdness in regards to endorsements and whatever have been a bit shaky, because originally, it was pretty basic who would he endorse, the left of center candidates. Usually, it would be the progressive alternative in the Democratic Party, and then he would try to seek his own Don Quixote bid in the general election. He spoke positive of Kucinich in 2004, and then he ended up running himself instead. He spoke positively about John Edwards in 2008, and then he ended up running himself. But then he started making some weird endorsements, where he spoke positively of people like Jim Webb and Michael Bloomberg. But either way, Anderson was still regarded as a pretty interesting candidate. Many people argued, why didn't he just run as a Green? Well, that's a little bit of a here and there thing. I think we will see a little bit about that in a little bit when we talk about some other things. But basically, Anderson was pretty notable. Ended up getting 7th place in the race. Now you might say, 7th place isn't that impressive. But then, when you look at the people that he lost to, you start to realize it actually is pretty impressive, all things considered. Because the only people that ended up beating Rocky Anderson were the duopoly candidates, Obama and Romney, the minor party trinity, Jill Stein, Gary Johnson, and Virgil Goode, not necessarily in that order. And, lastly, the only other person who beat him was Roseanne Barr, who was the person who had the #1 TV show in America from 1989 to 1990. So they weren't necessarily voting for her politics. It was pretty clear that wasn't the case because her politics is pretty amorphous. So yeah, actually, to be honest, it was actually still a little impressive. The fact that he was the #1 third-party candidate who didn't have something like those things to beat. And not too bad for a party that was literally running him and basically one or two other people. He ran. There was another person named Daniel Geary who ran for Senate in Utah. Then there was someone who was running in the 2nd district in Utah, but they ended up dropping out. So essentially, Rocky Anderson and his vice presidential candidate, Luis Rodriguez, and like Daniel Geary, they were the only people who were running as the Justice Party candidates. So for a small party, it actually did it really well, but of course, it could still do better. And there was a select few people who were interested to see what Rocky Anderson would end up doing next. However, 2016, he made the stunning decision to not really continue the Justice Party, but instead step aside because the ideal Justice Party candidate was already challenging Hillary Clinton for the Democratic Party nomination. But the way he worded the endorsement and the way he explained it, he sort of left the door open to potentially revitalizing the Justice Party later. This reminds me of a debate that Chris Hedges and Robert Reich had during the 2016 Democratic primaries, where I think it was like after the primaries, where it was like Chris Hedges was running as the like guy saying like we need to support a third party candidate. Meanwhile, Robert Reich was saying that it was best for them to support Hillary Clinton. Rocky Anderson basically took the side of Reich in that regard, especially considering Reich, he ended up doing something like, during the debate, he was saying like he would be open to the idea of trying to start a third party in the hypothetical Hillary Clinton winning scenario. So he always sort of kept the door open to the idea that the Justice Party might come back, but it basically became just sort of like a Twitter account that posted and reposted some stuff, usually stuff that was anti-Donald Trump, because Rocky ended up becoming sort of like a vote blue no matter who lib. And in that time period, like between 2016, it was basically dead. But then, in the aftermath to 2020 election, Rocky was openly talking about the idea of bringing the Justice Party back. And he had both smaller and larger ambitions. Larger, as in he wanted to bring in people regardless of political affiliation to join the party. And now he wants to ultimately replace the Democrats or the GOP as the new second party of the United States, but less because it sort of started to become less of a political party and more of something else, rebranding it to be called the Justice Movement. And again, seemingly like opening the doors to people who are outside of the traditional Democrat field, or I guess people who would be considered the left wing of the Democratic Party. You know, the people who this party was supposed to be like advocating for, and considering some things we'll get into in a second, you'll see why it's a little bit troubling. But you might be wondering, why the heck am I talking about the Justice Party or movement at all on this channel? Simply put, if you know the deep lore of this channel, you know that I was really into the Justice Party very early on when I was a wee little sock dem. I related a lot to Anderson, you know, atheist left-wing guy who was betrayed by the Democratic Party. So in a way, the Justice Party was the party that literally like spoke to me the most. While some people were advocating for like joining DSA and other people were advocating for joining the Greens or joining Justice Democrats or joining Movement for People's Party, I wanted to make it my thing that I was for the Justice Party. Did it really make that much of a difference? No. I mean, there was really nothing to do. The Justice Party was literally like a dead Twitter account at that point. There was really nothing to do. I would just sometimes say positive things about the Justice Party. I would find excuses to mention it whenever I could. Basically subliminally message people to support the Justice Party whenever it came back. And then eventually when I did come back, it was kind of a bit underwhelming. Now, with that out of the way, I guess we should finally get into the actual problems with the Justice Party. One of the biggest ones is very simple. It's dormancy. The dormancy of the Justice Party is really, really odd, especially considering Rocky's ambitions for the party nowadays. When we get into the last issue, we will see why that is, but I really don't understand, like literally, it was 5 years between the party endorsing Bernie in 2016 and then announcing a relaunch. Literally no activity outside of maybe like a tweet here and there. Literally no activity outside of it. Like literally, he could have done so much to keep the Justice Party alive. One of the biggest things is simple. Focusing on down the ballot races. Like, that's one of the things that I brought up to Rocky during like certain campaigns. It's just like, why don't you do something with the Justice Party? He's just like, but I don't want to spoil the election for like people. It's like, but you don't have to do that. You literally don't have to do that. And one of the ways you could do that is simple. Focus on down-the-ballot campaigns. Especially considering in his home state of Utah, there are a lot of offices that are so red that Democrats literally just don't run. So literally any opposition party would do well that contrasts with the GOP. How do I know this? Because there is a party in Utah that literally did just that when the Justice Party disappeared. The United Utah Party. They literally entered the scene in 2017, and despite the actual membership of the party being incredibly low, 2,891 active members as of the time I'm recording this, they actually managed to get votes in the tens of thousands for their candidates. Their state treasurer candidate in the latest election got a grand total of 94,265 votes. Because not a single Democrat ran, and people crave another option in a one-party state. And Rocky even has the perfect pitch for his party. Since the whole point of the Justice Party is trying to get back to the roots of the Democratic Party, he can pitch himself to working class voters, basically going, see, the Dems care so little about you that they won't even stand up to the GOP in this office. Maybe you deserve justice. Vote for Justice Party today. Like, if he wanted the Justice Party to replace the Democrats, he could have started in Utah. He could have started and made the Justice Party so prevalent that the state Democrats would sort of feel like they need to join the Justice Party in order to remain relevant. But not only did he let the Justice Party go dormant, it became pretty clear that he didn't just want it to go dormant. He wanted it to die. He wanted it to disappear. And how do I know this? Because Rocky Anderson literally gave away his party's name for someone else to use. Like, he stated, and I quote, that he gave Cenk Uygur permission to use the name Justice for Justice Democrats because he wasn't using it for the Justice Party. That was what he said. So not only did he let the Justice Party go dormant, now, like, he literally let the party go dormant and then let someone else come in, take its place, take all the momentum behind it, and then go somewhere else. Literally sucking away any relevance the Justice Party could have. The next problem relates to its sort of new, like, changing into the justice movement. See, it's kind of now becoming the point, like, for starters, what is the justice movement? I don't understand. Like, he's not been any remotely clear about what the justice movement is supposed to be. It's basically just a website and email list as far as I can tell. It's just website and email list. And the actual partisan-wise of it kind of is a little confusing, because now he wants to transition it into being sort of a big tent group, basically to bring in people like resistance libs and maybe like Republicans who are anti-Trump, which has kind of made it a little difficult for certain policies and politics that he has advocated for in the past to remain relevant in the party. See, rather than being firm and saying, I support X, Y, and Z, now he goes for more platitude-y language. Like, rather than saying, I support single-payer healthcare, he'll say something like, oh, I believe healthcare is a right. And it's like, anybody can say that, but it's like, what do you mean by that? This one isn't necessarily that bad, but except for the fact that Rocky kind of openly courts them, like, and not in the way I suggested for, like, him running the Justice Party as like an actual party, essentially forcing them to come to him. He's making it so that, oh, I will make myself more appealing to you so that you can come to me. And I mean, it's even to the point where technically he's not even registered as a Justice Party or Justice Movement person for his return to the mayoralship. And even though I do want him to be Salt Lake City mayor again, because he was objectively one of the best mayors that they had, and one of the best mayors in U.S. history, I don't necessarily know if he's going to be even on the level of Rocky Anderson, the previous mayor. Now, there's actually one big thing. Like, all of this is explained very good with one thing. All these issues sort of stem from one thing, and once you know what it is, it makes perfect sense. See, in the third-party sphere, there are actually many different types of third parties. Not every third party is the exact same. Each third party is a little bit different. Outside of course, ideological differences, there are many different reasons as to why they even form in the first place. For example, There are ones that are made to be an actual viable political party, advocate for issues, elect candidates, push for a certain ideology, etc., etc. Libertarians, Green Party, Constitution Party, Socialist Party of America, American Labor Party, etc. Ones that you can't really argue are not serious parties. Like, they are serious parties, for better and for worse. Then there are single issue parties, parties that are usually there to advocate for a singular issue and will usually fade away once that issue is established. Examples are the Legal Marijuana Now Party, the Approve of Voting Party, the Rent is Too Damn High Party, etc. Then there are third parties that advocate for interests of a particular population. The Aloha Ania Party, the Raza Unida Party, the Black Panther Party, etc. Then there are ones that are essentially glorified cliques and advocacy groups. The Socialist Equality Party, Workers' World Party. This is very common a lot more on the left than it is on the right. But I guess you could say that right-wing parties can sort of fall into this route too. It's basically like a small political party that really does not have that much outreach outside of like that small clique of either ideology or like just a group of friends or whatever. There are satirical parties like the Owl Party, the Rhinoceros Party in Canada, the Monster Raving Loony Party in the UK. But the last form of third party, which is one that a lot of people are all too familiar with, are the ones that are simply a vehicle for a person's presidential ambitions. Like, a person forms the party with the intention of basically just running for president under that party, and if they don't win, that party just essentially goes away. These are different from other third parties because of the fact that the Libertarian Party, for example, was not formed to run John Hospers for president. It may have been founded and John Hospers ran for president, but it was not founded specifically for that purpose. Same thing goes for the Socialist Party. It was not founded with the intention of Eugene Debs running for president. I know it may seem that way when you look at the presidential election results and seeing that Eugene Debs basically ran for president in all the elections that he was alive for, but I assure you that was not the case. Like, it wasn't just for that. Essentially, for the most part, a lot of his runs were literally afterthoughts for the party. He wanted to use that party to advocate for socialism, and then it just so happened that he did so partially by running for president. These ones are ones that are made solely with the intention of running a person for president and nothing more. Now, some examples of this are Rocky de la Fuente's parties, the American Delta Party and the Alliance Party. Although the Alliance Party is still trying to pretend to be something more than it is, but we'll get to that in a bit. There's La Follett's Progressive Party, the Dixiecrats, and, from what it seems, pretty obvious in retrospect, the Justice Party. Now, be that as it may, here's the thing. These type of parties, they can evolve. They can transition into forming a new party. They could actually want to go beyond simply just being that vehicle for the presidential campaign. The American Independent Party, the Reform Party, the Bull Moose Party, they were sort of ones that did, to an extent, transition away from just being a vehicle for a presidential bid. Some were more successful than others, but while they were formed with the intention of basically being a vehicle for a presidential run, they did sort of evolve into beyond that. And I do believe that Rocky Anderson, he might have originally formed the Justice Party with the intention of just being like his vehicle to run for president, but maybe he does want it to literally go beyond him. But if he did so, then he's doing a really piss poor job at it. And one of the biggest problems is the fact that basically none of the people who actually do this want to put in the work to do this. That's why they put all the effort into the presidential campaign, because if the presidential campaign succeeds, then they actually do have the chance to, actually do what they can. Like, for example, if Rocky Anderson literally did run and win the presidency of the United States, then he actually would have been able to turn the Justice Party into a viable political force, just by virtue of him being able to win. But the problem is, they put all their eggs in that basket, when they need to do more than that. Like AMLO. AMLO didn't just put all of his eggs in the basket of winning the presidency. He found other PRD members to join his party, and thus kickstart the party of already having prevalent political forces in its agenda. Then he started running candidates in their upcoming midterm elections. Then he found the vehicle to launch his presidential bid. And then it transitioned Morena to be a very serious political party. AMLO put in the work to transition the party into being prevalent and then pushed for his presidential bid. And unfortunately, that's why a lot of these other organizations that don't really rely on a presidential bid to kick them forward do manage to be more successful in the long term. Like Justice Dems and Brand New Congress. Well, Brand New Congress is a bad example, but like Justice Dems and DSA, for example. Granted, they did need that presidential bid of Bernie to give them the push to start, but it's not like they needed like Bernie Sanders to run a second bid to be viable. They got the momentum regardless, and that momentum is now there and thriving. Meanwhile, a third party, you literally do need to keep that momentum going. Like, you need to have people continually run candidacies for president and for high office. And unfortunately, Rocky has kind of fumbled that regard, so he really can't continue the Justice Party or movement any further. Would I like to see it be successful for whatever it is? Sure, I guess. But I mean, at this point, it's like, what is it doing? I want to know what it's doing. Like, what is actually the plan? I don't get it. I mean, I guess aside from running to keep Rocky mayor of Salt Lake City, I guess. Anyways, that's pretty much all I gotta say. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.